Hello and welcome to Politics Today, and in this programme today we'll be discussing how 122 church leaders across this nation are taking the government to court over the closure of churches due to the COVID-19 restrictions. And this programme today I'm joined by Pastor Tobo Morris from CRC Church in London. Warm welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
And also Tim Dieppe, who is the Head of Public Policy at Christian Concern. Tim, firstly, on behalf of myself and behalf of our viewers, we want to thank you for the excellent work you all do at Christian Concern in defending our Christian values. And considering the moral mess that our nation is in, it would be even worse if Christian Concern wasn't there. So thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Well, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting us on here. Always like to be on your programme. Thank you.
Pleasure. And Pastor Tobo, do you want to give us a little bit of introduction about yourself and your church and the remit of your church?
Yes, my name is Tobo. I'm originally from South Africa. I pastor a church, my wife and myself pastor a church called CRC London. And we are an international move of God, which we are so privileged to be part of. We focus on church plants across the UK, Europe and the world. And currently we have 3 campuses in London, and a few smaller churches in the UK and Europe. And we are so excited for what God is doing in our midst and in the UK. And we are looking forward for greater things to happen in the future.
Awesome. And Tim, just explain some of the challenges that Christian Concern have faced during this whole year of darkness known as COVID-19 that's affected all of us and affected.
Well, it's an extraordinary year, isn't it, Simon? And it's really accelerated, I think, the sort of pace of change of culture and the way in which culture is sort of moving more against or antagonistic towards Christianity. And you know, we have this big slogan, save lives, save the NHS, and at the same time we've decriminalised or allowed people to do pills by post, DIY abortions at home, and twice as many abortions as deaths from COVID. Where's the saving lives in that? And that was meant to be an emergency measure while abortion clinics were closed, and they're carrying it on all the time, and now they're saying they want to make it permanent, so the consultation's gone out to do that. So that's something we've been challenging and campaigning on. And then obviously the closure of churches for the first time in hundreds of years. It's been a criminal offence to open a church on a Sunday. I mean, an extraordinary situation for us to be placed in. That they criminalise Christian worship on Sunday mornings in this country with all the heritage and history that it has of that. And so we've been challenging that and fighting that as well.
Excellent. I'm so pleased for the work you're doing. And Pastor Tobo, how has COVID-19 affected your church and the ministry that you're involved in?
Well, personally, I think we as a church were fairly prepared for a season like this. But you're never prepared for what it cause among people, the mental state of people, what people are going through, people being isolated, you know. It's a huge problem. We're sitting with a lot of cases of people, you know, struggling in the season, a lot of people losing their jobs, a lot of people having problems upon problems, which were really never there, caused by this. For myself, there's a bigger issue than just meeting together. There's problems, emotional problems, mental problems that we need to deal with in a greater state now in this season than ever before. And I think the long-term damage that it caused society is what we don't even see right now. I think in the next year, 2 years, we're going to really see the effect of this lockdown and the season that we are in currently.
And Tim, can you explain the reason why 122 church leaders are taking legal action against the government in terms of closing churches on Sunday, stopping worship, and the reason behind this?
Yeah, so we think that it was actually unconstitutional and illegal for the government to close churches. It's so well set in our constitution, right back to Magna Carta, the Church of England shall be free is the first line, actually, of Magna Carta. And the independence of church and state, that the government shouldn't be dictating to the church what it can do and what it can't do. So actually, Pastor Tobo here was amongst the first group who challenged this legally back in May in the first lockdown, and then a lot more support now in the second lockdown, as well as our legal action. 1,500 pastors signed a letter to the Prime Minister saying that you shouldn't close churches. And it's kind of extraordinary what's happening, because it's clear there's discrimination here. Churches are allowed to hand out bread but not to give out the bread of life, right? Administering communion is illegal as we speak today. You know, at the moment, churches are allowed to open for blood banks, but not to administer communion. You know, you can't meet up in free, you know, you can host non-spiritual events, but spiritual events are illegal. You know, and you can't have a prayer meeting, but you can have a meeting for homeless people or whatever. You know, it is clearly discriminatory. It's clearly wrong. It's clearly, you know, un-Christian. And this group of 120 pastors from a whole range of different denominations and groups and all different places in the country is saying, come on, you know, we need to put a stop to this. This shouldn't have happened. And you know, we understand it was an emergency, but, you know, in an emergency, what do we need to do? We need to pray.
Absolutely.
Right? We need to pray. We need to worship. We need to seek God's help. And the government's banning us from getting together to do that. So, yes, you know, we're taking the government, or the 120 pastors are seeking judicial review of this. We'll see where that goes. Initially, it's been turned down, but we're going to seek to revive that again with an oral hearing on it, and we're going to pursue this as far as we can and demonstrate that it was unconstitutional and churches should have been allowed to meet all the way through.
Pastor Sabo, I think one thing we have to address really is that has the government ignored the spiritual health of the nation? Wanting to tackle COVID-19 and this pandemic, are they ignoring the spiritual aspect of this one? If we compare, for example, in the States prior to the US presidential election, there were 30,000 American Christians who gathered together at the Washington Mall to pray, to fast, intercede, with the support of the Trump administration, because they realized that prayer was absolutely vital. Do you think the spiritual health of our nation is at risk with our churches being continued to be closed as of the recording of this program?
Well, absolutely. I believe that that is the case. It's not just at risk. I think the spiritual health of our nation is being exposed. I've been fortunately enough to be on a round table of 50 Christian leaders since the start of this pandemic. And I have to say,
that's with the government, isn't it?
That's with the government, yeah. With the faith minister.
Yeah.
I can just speak out of my own experience. You know, I think for them, it's a tick box exercise, trying to get spiritual leaders involved. But I mean, any recommendation you make to them, ask them to come back with proof, come back with questions. They just don't come back to you. And that's my personal experience. I've written an email personally to the faith minister and asked him certain questions to come back in writing to me on things like face mask. You know, why can't we worship with a mask? You can talk with a mask, but you can't sing a song with a mask, which is just, I wanted the scientific proof. Till today, it's 6 months later, he has not responded to me, being on the table, asking him to come back to me in writing. So there's a bigger agenda involved over here. And I think the spiritual health of churches in this nation has been exposed. It's time for the church to wake up. It's time for Christians to really wake up and realize what's behind all of this. If the government is really, and that's my opinion, interested to help churches, they would listen to the senior leaders, not just myself, many others, and heed our advice when it comes to spiritual things. And not just see it as a tick box exercise, giving through information and thinking that is good enough. It is for them to sit down and listen to what we say, because we work with people. And we are here to help people. We are here to save people. We are here to care for people. This is what we do for a living. And I think the government needs to be able to sit down and listen to people like ourselves and many, many other more across the spectrum and ask advice, because we see people deteriorate in many levels through this. Tim just mentioned the abortion thing. You know, it came as for the lockdown, but now they're pushing this DIY abortions in homes, which is absolutely wrong. And I just think the government should have a bigger ear to the church that has their hands and feet among people, working among people, and ask the right questions, ask to learn from us so that we can help, because we see the danger mentally, emotionally, when it comes to this whole season that we are in.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing, Simon, is that what we had this second time, in this second lockdown, even the Archbishop of Canterbury and Cardinal Nichols and other religious leaders, it made it clear that they hadn't even been consulted about this, right? The government didn't even ask the Archbishop of Canterbury, can we lock down churches? Are you okay if we do that? And even those people were objecting, saying, no, this is wrong. We shouldn't be closing churches. And then they came out saying, I think the government's going to back down. Well, they were wrong. The government didn't back down. And so, the level of lack of consultation on the one hand and lack of evidence. The government was never able to show any evidence of any transmission of disease in a COVID-compliant church. So why close the churches, right? You've got off licenses open, right?
And garden centres.
And garden centres, yeah. Somehow they're more important, somehow they're prioritised relative to actual worship and actual spiritual life, which is even more important than physical life, isn't it, right? And the spiritual life is being closed down, shut down, you can't do it, it's not necessary, not important, and that is so oppressive for churches.
But Tim, just looking at the kind of wider perspective on this one, and that freedom of religion is one of our cherished values in our democracy. This has been part of British life for centuries. So the fact is that the government have decided to close down churches during the lockdowns. I think as a recording of this programme, we're actually going out of our national lockdown in England as of tomorrow, or as of tonight after 12. But it does raise one serious issue, I think, that we all need to discuss. And that is, isn't there a great danger once our liberties are taken away from us, they're very, very hard to get back. And what response would you say to our viewers watching this programme who are very concerned that the churches are not open, they can't go into their churches, they can't meet up with their friends, and how important is it that all of us stand up and say to the government, it's time that our churches be opened?
Well, I think we all should, and I think, write to your MPs and campaign and make this clear that this should never happen again, basically. And we need to complain about it. And I think this point about freedom of religion is very important. That European Convention of Human Rights is enshrined in our law. Freedom of religion and belief is part of that. And again, we want to try and show, we think we can show that this is illegal to have closed the church in this way. And let's not forget as well that it undermines our diplomacy outside internationally, as we argue that countries like Algeria and China shouldn't close churches, and they'll point back to us, say, well, you closed churches, and then the government will say, oh, we did that for safety reasons. They'll say, well, that's why we're closing churches, for safety reasons. And suddenly our diplomacy for freedom of religion is completely undermined by this move to close down churches here in the UK.
And if we look at internationally, Pastor Tobo, we look, the first thing President Trump did when America came out their lockdown was to open up the churches. We've seen already for example, in Germany, that the churches have remained open. And even in France, there's been a case that went to the High Court in France to allow churches to open, going against the government guidelines and legislation. So what will it take for the churches to open in this country right now?
I personally think this is a dress rehearsal to see what church and Christians will do in the future. It's like you rightfully say, if they take our rights away from us, we might not get it back. Now, we need to focus on the future. We need to focus long term. As the church, we need to wake up and realize that there's always a hidden agenda behind things. And if we are just going to allow the state to move into the sphere of church, which has never happened, and Tim can correct me, in 890 years. It's the first time that a British government moved into the sphere of church. The first time.
That's right.
Now, that is a big move. That is a big move. And I just believe that we need to, as the church, get together. We need to realize, hey, this is the time for us to stand up. People need the church.
Absolutely.
In our church right now, and I can only talk from our experience, we're seeing people coming to Jesus more than ever. We're seeing people want to come to church. We've reached people in the lockdown which we've never reached before, because people are desperate for hope. They want hope. They want life. They want people to care for them. And we couldn't get our hands upon them. We couldn't get to them. Now, that's a big concern for myself as a pastor. And let me just say, the UK is supposed to be the biggest Christian nation in the world. It's, for myself, the nation that spread the gospel all over the world. And here we sit with a government that lock us down not to minister the gospel of Jesus in our own nation. I think it's unacceptable.
I agree. Tim, do you want to describe the particular case that you've been working on, which is absolutely outrageous, regarding Pastor Daniel and Kingdom Faith in Milton Keynes that made the Mail on Sunday? The fact that 9 police officers came in to arrest him because he was having a church service on Zoom in his church, which he was complying with the government's.
Yes, I know. Well, so Pastor Daniel is also one of the pastors taking the government to court around this, pursuing legal action on this. And he was running a live stream service, as you're allowed to do in his church in Milton Keynes. And as you're allowed to do, he had a small worship group and people operating the PA and the lighting and the cameras and all of that kind of stuff. So, maybe 15 people or so, which you're allowed to do. And that's within the guidance. And 2 police officers turned up and said they'd had complaints and that they're breaking the law, not allowed to do this. So the pastor tried to show them on his phone or his iPad, no, the regulations say we're allowed to do this. They said, we're not going to read that, you're just disobeying the law. And eventually 9 police officers came and his service had to be stopped and cancelled. And then eventually he showed them the regulations and they seemed to agree that he was allowed to do this. Then 2 days later on Tuesday night, police officers come to his home and caution him and say that he's being charged with breaking the law around this. And, there's video footage about this as well. And the point is that, and the police have now apologised for this, right, because they were wrong. The law allows him to do what he did. But the point is the police, they're taking the law into their own hands. They don't know what the law is. And they're coming and they think, there's some people here worshipping, we better stop them, that's illegal. Well, it was legal as it was. They were just doing a live stream with minimal people in the room. And that was allowed to do. And still the police came and interrupted and very oppressively challenged him and then came round to his house a few days later to caution him about it.
And Pastor Tubbo, do you think there's a real danger here, particularly as the police are in danger of being called the COVID police, that they're concerned more about dealing with COVID-19 cases than tackling real crime, which they should be focusing on, and the damage that does between the community and the police force?
Absolutely. I totally believe that is the case. The police officers are here to as a service for the nation. These events is going to break the trust between communities and the police. We encourage all Christians to be law-abiding citizens. That's what we believe in. And then to get the police force that is aggressive, shutting down churches, in a westernized country, supposed to be a Christian country, these type of things happens in communist nations. These things do not happen in our nation. And there's many other crimes that is not being investigated. If you just look at the riots, I'm not going to name names, but the riots of the last, say, 3-4 months in the city, how the riots of certain groups were handled towards the riots that just happened this last weekend in London. How aggressive the police were with peaceful people that is just rioting or coming together, protesting against the lockdowns. Where in other cases they were burning, breaking, vandalizing, and the police just stood back. I mean, what message are you sending out to law-abiding citizens that have trust in the police force to have common sense? I think it is morally wrong. And I think that the government doesn't realize dealing with citizens in this way is in the long run not going to be beneficiary.
And in response to the arrest of Pastor Daniel, we have a Conservative MP that was quoted in the Sunday Times, Peter Bone, who said, I am flabbergasted. This looks like a police state. It's the sort of thing that would happen in communist China. And this is a Conservative MP talking about the case regarding Daniel. And we know, as of this programme at the moment, there are 100 Conservative MPs willing to defy the government over the latest tier restrictions to tackle COVID-19.
Yeah, we'll find out how many, won't we?
As we come out of our national lockdown.
Yeah.
But my question really is there enough MPs as well standing up saying it's vital that the churches remain open and it's vital that Christians can pray and intercede for our nation, and it's vital that we protect this very important, cherished institution, which is religious freedom in this country.
I mean, I don't think there is enough MPs, but I was encouraged just last week that Danny Kruger MP in Parliament, there was a Westminster Hall debate about freedom of religion and the effect of COVID on freedom of religion. And a lot of it was focused on what happened abroad and issues around other countries, which are very severe, and we need to be mindful of that. But Danny Kruger brought it right back home and said, actually, here in the UK, we have breached freedom of religion. And he actually said he thought it was unconstitutional, it breaches Magna Carta, and that churches should be left alone and churches should be allowed to open and probably were continually allowed to open under law anyway. So we have got at least one strong MP who said that, and a number of other MPs spoke when it was debated in November the 4th about lockdown 2. A number of MPs challenged the government about closing churches as well, and the government didn't have a good answer for that. So the government, I think, is feeling the pressure on this, and they've got the legal case as well to be mindful of. But we really want more people to be speaking out about this and more people challenging them, and do ask your MPs about it and challenge them around it. I mean, I think they've not got a strong case on it. I mean, I think, what is the case for closing churches when you've got off licenses open? I don't get it.
I don't either. And Pastor Talbot, what is the cost for example, for yourself as a church pastor and other churches across the country, if we constantly go from one lockdown to another, not allowing churches to open, or allowing churches to open with only a limited number of people, and then go into another lockdown in January and still keep the churches closed? What impact is that having actually on the church in this country, would you say?
I think it's got an enormous impact. Every church is different. Every pastor has his own challenges. Many of us are trying to build momentum. We need to disciple people. We've got new people that's coming in, giving their lives to Jesus that we need to take care of. But we can't get our hands on them. We can't get them into a family, which we believe it's the family. It's the household of God. So we can't minister to them effectively. Other pastors that I speak to, some of their congregations are now, people have become fearful to come together, or for somebody to pray for them or lay hands upon them, or all the stuff that we believe as Bible-believing Christians, for the Holy Spirit to work and for us to effectively minister to people. Now, some pastors, the financial repercussions of this season is tremendous, because families are losing their jobs, which they can't provide for themselves. Some people stop giving their tithes and their offerings or their contributions for the spreading of the gospel. I just think it's enormous. We're going to see the effect in the next 12 months to 24 months, really see what effect it will have in the future for the church.
And Tim, we got down to the last 5 minutes of the programme, so I've got two very important questions for you. The first one is, how successful do you think these 122 church leaders in this country taking the government to court over the closure of churches due to the COVID-19 pandemic will actually have? And my second question is, what role can our viewers play in supporting this very important legal case to get our churches open?
Well, look, I think that the case against the government is very, very strong. And I think, supported by what Danny Kruger said in Parliament, supported by Magna Carta, supported by freedom of religion, supported by the fact that in Germany, the courts established that the government couldn't close churches. And so in their recent lockdown, churches were not closed. And in other countries, other jurisdictions as well, similar things have happened. So I think it's a very, very strong case. And we have to wait and see it tested in court and tested before a judge and see where that goes. But I'd encourage your viewers to support the work of Christian Concern. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Connect with us and sign up for our emails on our website, christianconcern.com, and be active. Talk about it. Ask your pastor to engage with local authorities and MPs about it. Engage yourself with your MP about it and ask them about it. I think it's time for the church to speak up on this and be bold and say, hey, actually, spiritual life is more important than physical life, and the spiritual life of the country is at risk and has deteriorated. And churches have really struggled, I think, to maintain community when you can't meet up face to face. I mean, praise God for Zoom meetings, praise God for YouTube live streams and things. At least we're able to do that. But it's not the same as meeting up in person and chatting in person. A lot of people are getting tired of these live streams and disengaging from them or choosing to catch up later rather than engage with everyone at the same time and all that kind of thing. And you can't do laying on of hands, you can't do communion, you can't do baptism, you can't really worship together. I think it's a serious issue.
And Pastor Tobo, less than about 2.5 minutes of the programme left. So what message do you have for our viewers watching this programme today, and how vital is it that Christians speak up now, because our very Christian liberties are seriously under threat at this time?
Yeah, I believe that the Churches of Jesus is the pillar of truth in society, and that we have a responsibility to speak up about what is right and what is wrong. It is also our responsibility to make sure that people understand that the church is not a building. Then when we talk about closing churches and stuff, we talk about people getting together. This is the problem, where Jesus tells us we should not forsake the coming together and to worship God. And it's a relationship. What God calls us into is a relationship with Him and relationship with each other. And when we can't, engage, what type of relationship do you have? And that is the power of the church, is the getting together, forming relationships, having a household, worshiping our God together, and believe that our God is powerful, almighty, and when we come together to praise Him, He is going to bring us the breakthrough. He's going to do the miracle. And I just believe that now, more than ever, is our responsibility as Christians to stand up and say, this is what we believe. We believe in a God that's almighty, all-powerful, and that Jesus is the answer. And we need to be very careful that if we do not stand up, we're going to have a problem in the future.
Pastor Tebu and Tib Diep from Christian Concern, thank you so much for being my guests on Politics today.
Thank you, Simon.
And I want to thank you for watching this very important programme today. It's absolutely vital and critical that our churches remain open. As Christians, we've been silent for too long. And it's time that the government heard from the church in this nation.
That's right.
And it's time that they open our churches so that we can go back to worshipping God, because the only way we're going to tackle this COVID-19 crisis is through prayer and intercession. That's if our government actually want us to be delivered from this pandemic. So I want to thank you for watching Politics Today.